Hello and welcome to Pastor's Library. My name is Stephen Redman and this is the channel where we talk about everything to do with Christian books, books of a theological nature, books that might be on a reading list for your seminary course or your bachelor's or master's degrees. We're going to talk today about a very specific book, and if you like what we have to say today, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube, please subscribe, please click on the bell, and the bell will make sure that you get to hear of our next release. And the subscription will just help us survive better as a channel. And we appreciate your support, we really do. Now, before I tell you about this book, I just want to come clean about something. And that is that I grew up in a classical Pentecostal church. Leadership was mainly masculine, but I have been in churches where the main pastor, the senior pastor, was a woman, and I have been in churches where women were in eldership, certainly on the leadership team. And so whereas I experienced a majority of masculine leadership, women in leadership have never scared me, they've never put me off, they've never confused me with scripture. I've always seen how the scripture allows for women in leadership. And so a lot of friends of mine, particularly those in the Church of England, have had a very different experience, and they've had to come to terms with women in leadership, and some of them still haven't done that. But all the same, what I'm saying to you is I have got a bookshelf full of books about women in ministry, and they broadly fall into two categories: complementarian and egalitarian. Egalitarian meaning equal, and complementarian meaning different. I do see how the majority of women are superior than men in certain roles, and vice versa. But the reality is where the gift is, I say follow the gift and anoint the gifted one. And so I suppose I would always come down on the egalitarian side. So if that's a problem to you, I'm sorry. But the book I want to share with you today is a new one by Nijay Gupta. It's called Tell Her Story. I think in America, women in ministry or women in leadership has become a really, really big deal in recent years, because just at the same time that there's been the Me Too movement in the States, there has also been a movement to try and get churches to recognise women who have a clear leadership gift. I understand the biblical arguments on both sides, but I also recognise that there are some women that just simply should be allowed to lead and certainly allowed to teach. Now, like I say, if that's a problem to you, I can only apologise for my view. Now, Nijay Gupta has started life as a complementarian and has changed his view. And in this book, he puts down his change in view to when he started to be able to read the Bible in the original languages, in Hebrew and in Greek. He says that is where he can look back and say, now that is when I started to change my mind about what the Bible actually said. And I think, we can all talk about our favourite Bible version. There are a couple of Bible versions that do lean very much, because of their translation, over to women should not be allowed to lead. But the majority of modern translations that are produced by a good team lean the other way, or at least, shall we say, are more open to the subject. Tell Her Story, I would suggest to you, when we get the book awards at the end of the year, I would suggest to you this might be one of those top books of the year, because it's written by a highly academic person who uses clear and accessible language, and he has studied the status of New Testament women exhaustively, exactly what the Apostle Paul allowed them to do. So when I say this is written by a true academic, I stress to you it's written by somebody who reads the original language, is a master of New Testament Greek. What I would say to you is that this book touches on all matters feminine when it comes to leadership, teaching, involvement in governing the church. And having read a number of his books, I would say to you, I always find him very easy to read. But he gets down to the meat of the scripture from an academic point of view in a very readable fashion. I think he speaks clearly, he speaks authoritatively, and he makes a clear pathway through a decidedly overgrown jumble of cultural undergrowth. Ultimately, Gupta makes us face up to the fact that too often we look at women in the church through a 21st century cultural lens, either applying a feminist worldview or a patriarchal one. When the reality is that what we really need to do is research the first century view. We need to look at women in the sense that they were when Paul was writing to them. Fortunately, our understanding of the first century has improved beyond belief in the last 60 years or so. And we do have a range of good academic work to dig into to support Gupta's writing, which are not revisionist, but simply add clarity to what has often been a jumble. The New Testament was, of course, written for first century Christians, and to fully grasp its nuances, we have to read it as they did. When you read this book, I would suggest to you, it's more than just recognising that Junia, who was an apostle, Paul says, an apostle before he was, Junia is a woman, not a man. And there are one or two versions that have translated to Junius, which is a male name, but that is a corruption of the translation. It's not valid if you look in the original Greek. So it's not just about Junia. Number of people have written books about Junia, and some of them are very, very good indeed. But it's not about trying to bang that drum. In this book, I would suggest to you, you would gain new respect for Phoebe, for Prisca or Priscilla, for Damaris, and for Nympha. And as you read this book, you will see things from a very even-handed fashion. Gupta is not bashing the egalitarian drum. What he's trying to do is just to help us see how Paul saw these women and how they functioned in the early church, and maybe just to ask us whether or not there's any reason why it should be different today. So he isn't really banging his drum. He isn't coming out as an egalitarian per se. What he's saying is, let's just have a look what Paul says, and let's look at that through the eye of first century culture and see what we come out with. And I found this riveting. I found I couldn't put this book down till I'd finished it. I found that this book was incredibly absorbing. It was also incredibly revealing. There were things in here that I had never realised before. And what I would suggest to you is that when you've read this book, you may well find yourself recognising that some of these women whose names I've just mentioned were pastors, were teachers, were church leaders, and dare I say it, were elders. You may feel the need to gargle with antiseptic mouthwash at this point to have even said that, even if I'm the one who said it and you only thought it. Without doubt, this book is going to be an outstanding book of 2023. And I would suggest to you, it's probably a must read. I'm not saying that I'm an egalitarian, you're a complementarian, you need to change, this is the book that will do it, because it isn't really like that. This is a book that egalitarians and complementarians should both read, because we will both learn something about Paul's women. We will both learn something about them. And when we do that, I found myself reading pages and getting to the bottom of the page and thinking, hang on, I need to read that again. And it wasn't because I dropped asleep. It's because I realised that there was an awful lot there and I need to chew it through. So what I am saying about this is the best book I have read in recent years on women in ministry. I have read other books which I think are as good or better. Mentioning Roger Forster's book on women in ministry, which is very, very good. But this book is written by a true academic, and all he's trying to do is show us what it says on the page. So this is what I would say is a must read for this year. You need to get your children to buy it for you, or you need to boldly take the step of ordering it yourself. If the idea of reading a book like this sticks in your gullet so much, get your kids to order it for you. But it is a very worthwhile book. I have really been blessed by this, and I cannot speak too highly of it. This is the sort of book that should be on every church bookstall. And some people will dismiss it. Some people will welcome it with open arms. But what I would say is it will allow you to see, probably for the first time, what the scripture is actually telling us about these women. I hope that helps you. I really recommend this book. This is one I could go on about all day, but I'm going to shut up now. But I would ask you, if you've liked this, would you please give us a thumbs up? Remember to subscribe, remember to ring the bell, and I'll see you next time on Pastor's Library. Until then, bye!